Welcome to the Orca. Recently, the NDP government announced that 19 building trades construction unions would be given a monopoly on building the Pattullo Bridge and the Eastern Highway 1 expansion project. Anyone working on those projects will be forced by the government to join those NDP-approved unions, which represent only about 15% of the construction workers in the province. What about the thousands of workers who have chosen to organize themselves differently? The Canada West Construction Union is not one of the NDP's chosen unions, and its workers will be forced to leave the CWU if the NDP doesn't change its mind. The president of the CWU joins us now. Ken Baerg, good morning. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
The NDP is normally supportive of all unionized labor, so why is the NDP not supportive of your group?
Well, our union takes worker advocacy very seriously. That's what gets us up in the morning, but we do it from a bit of a different perspective. We do it from what we would call a mutual gains perspective or a collaborative perspective, and that is we think employees' interests are actually advanced best when an employer is successful, and an employee at the end of the year with a great T4 is something that we actually ought to be celebrating, not a fictitious number at the back of a collective agreement that may or may not position the employer to secure work in a competitive marketplace. So yeah, we believe in a partnership-based approach, one that's collaborative and celebrates mutual gains.
Did the NDP approach you about this before they designated the 19 building trade unions?
No, absolutely not. We found out with all of the other stakeholders through the media announcement.
Did you reach out to the government at all?
Yeah, and we've certainly reached out to the government for purposes of just general consultation, but no, this entire announcement, while it was anticipated in some form, it's the final iteration came down through an announcement that the details we were not privy to in advance.
So, if the NDP goes forward with this, what potential harm could it create?
Well, there's I guess two significant areas of concern, and that is one, the exclusivity of it. It excludes a good segment of the workers, and two, it simply does not provide good value for taxpayers. So when you talk about the fact that these unions, the 19 preferred unions that they're working with, represent a small sliver of the overall construction workforce, think about that from the perspective of a construction worker in BC who pays taxes like everybody else. And really what the government is saying to these workers is, notwithstanding the fact that you're a member of the public paying taxes to fund this project, you can't work on it because you belong to the wrong union or you belong to no union at all. And then the other element is certainly the one of competition. If you exclude the number of contractors who are willing to bid on a job like this by virtue of their affiliation with the union, you're limiting the competitive dynamic, and limited participants in a bid on a project is going to mean costs escalate for all British Columbians.
When you say it's not good value for the taxpayers, can you expand on that? What do you mean?
Well, there's a couple of things. When a contractor may look at this project and say, I'm not willing to bid on it based on the labor model that comes part and parcel with that. So if you think about the fact that only approximately 15% of the construction workforce in the province is unionized, that represents a small segment of the contractor community. And if you're only looking at those contractors who ultimately are interested in bidding on the job, you've eliminated a huge portion of the marketplace, and competition helps people sharpen pencils and get better value for taxpayers.
So what are the long-term ramifications here?
Well, in I guess in the short and medium term, we have workers who are excluded from these projects. Right now, we've been given an indication that this model is going to be limited to the Pattullo Bridge and the Highway 1 expansion from Kamloops to the Alberta border. But you can bet the NDP is getting pressure from their building trades allies to apply this to other publicly funded projects. So in the short medium term, we know that there's a few $1 billion worth of work that's going to be handed out like a discretionary perk to the union allies, the NDP. In the long term, if this model is implemented on other publicly funded projects, we're going to see this problem grow, and that problem being a lack of competition and a lack of access for workers to these projects.
So what do you do about this?
Well, there's a legal challenge that's in the works right now and has been filed as to the constitutionality of whether or not this can be defended on a constitutional basis. And more narrowly speaking, it has to do with freedom of association for workers to belong to or not to belong to a union. So there's that legal challenge, but really we're trying to also spread the word to the broader public, and I think the general public has taken notice that exclusive deals of this nature are simply they're shameless political payoffs, and they don't provide good value, and they don't provide access to work for the broad cross-section of British Columbians.
Isn't this like poaching? If the government says it has to be these 19 unions that they've designated, do you feel that you at the CWU and other unions might lose members who want the work and go to these other unions?
Yeah, ultimately, it's going to depend what happens in the marketplace in a broad perspective. There's LNG Canada being announced. We'll see what happens with the Trans Mountain expansion. There's other infrastructure projects that workers can consider. But certainly, there's the potential for some workers to say, hey, I want to work on one of these projects, but I kind of got to play the game. I got to go sign up with one of these unions, leave the union that I'm used to, leave the team that I'm used to, and go join one of these other unions in order to get access to this work that I'm paying for as a member of the public. There is certainly a poaching element at play here as well.
Ken, we'll continue to follow the story. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.